Hello, everyone, and welcome to my channel, which is called GHDV, which stands for God Hates Domestic Violence. I started this channel, this is my first video, because I want to talk about my personal experience of domestic violence. I want to raise more awareness. There's lots of content out there about domestic violence, and I just feel it's important for me to share my story as well, so that people can become aware of the different types of domestic violence and how insidious it can be. People normally assume that domestic violence is to do with the physical abuse and sometimes sexual abuse. Over the past 2 years, I've come to learn that domestic violence involves so many different types of abuse, such as emotional or psychological abuse, spiritual abuse, financial abuse, narcissistic abuse, coercive control, and I think other forms of abuse that maybe I'm not aware of right now. I'm currently going through a divorce from my ex-husband. We were in a relationship for 24 and a half years, married for 23 and a half of those years. About 2 years ago, I found out that my relationship was abusive. I didn't know anything about emotional abuse or any other forms of abuse. When I found out I was in a abusive relationship, I initially asked for a separation. That didn't resolve anything, so I'm currently going through a divorce. Just a little bit about myself. I am a born again Christian. I became born again when I was 26 at uni. At the time, I was a fairly happy person, very sort of easygoing, and I was just really desperate to find love, looking for love. I was very insecure as well, and as a result, I was always looking for male validation. Um, I would describe myself when I became born again. I knew very little scripture. I didn't spend time working on my relationship with God, learning about my identity in Christ. Um, I wasn't planted in a church where I could really grow and just develop my faith. At 26, I was born again. I graduated, and about a year later, I traveled abroad. And that's where I met my ex husband. Within 6 months, I'd met him. And a year later, we were married to the date. Um, when I met him, I thought I found my mate, my life's partner. But I was very wrong. At the beginning, he was very charming, very charismatic, very confident. He had really excellent leadership qualities. I admired him. He had great big plans, he was very ambitious politically, and I wanted to share in his plans. I hadn't spent time developing my own ambitions, my own dreams, my own plans, because as I said before, I'd spent all my time just looking for love. And when I met him, within a few weeks we were romantically involved. He told me that he would marry me. When he first said that, I paused and I said to him, I have to pray about it first. And he became upset. And when I noticed that he'd become upset, I just kind of agreed and I said, okay, I'll marry you. At the time, I didn't know that that was a red flag. I'd say a few weeks into the relationship, he was telling me about what to wear, approving or disapproving of my clothing, my choice of food, my hairstyle at the time. Also, other things happened within a short time of me meeting him. I remember I had some problems with the host I was staying with, some accommodation problems. So I went over to hostel because he lived adjacent to me. And I was just talking about that. And as I left, I remember he gave me a kiss on my left cheek, my right cheek, my forehead, and then he kissed me on the lips. And I ran away because I wasn't ready for that at the time. I thought it was too soon. I didn't know him. I didn't know anybody really who knew him. So I ran off. And as I was running, I was thinking, no, 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 what have you done? You know. But anyway, that kind of like signaled the beginning of our romantic relationship. A few days later, I'd say, he was sitting outside of my accommodation with my host's house, and he said to me, "You love me, don't you?" And I was taken aback again, and I had just met this man. I didn't know him that well, but he said, "You love me. Tell me you love me." And I was like, "I like you. I'm not sure I love you, but I like you." But he was insistent, and eventually I gave in because one of the other things I'd say was a character flaw. I was very, very afraid of being rejected and abandoned, and I was afraid of losing my relationship with him. Um, so that incident happened. Another incident happened was within that time, a friend of his had invited us to a wedding, and so we went to the wedding. We had an argument at the wedding, and he left. My ex-husband left. He left me at the wedding. Now, I was in this big city. I didn't really know anyone, and it was in the evening. So he left because he was angry with me. And I panicked. I got this sense of dread that I was losing the relationship. So I was afraid. I didn't want to lose the relationship. I was so afraid of losing this relationship, of being abandoned and rejected by him. So I panicked, and I started calling him and trying to find out where he was. I was basically chasing this man. Eventually, I think I must have rang one of his friends who I think told me where he was. So I went there, and his friend came round, picked us up, sorted things out between us, and we got back together in the relationship again. The relationship continued. I didn't know at the time that his behavior, basically ditching me at his friend's wedding, was a huge red flag that I should have left. I should have realized at the time that this is not the kind of man that I needed to be with. But like I said, I was very afraid of losing the relationship. To describe the relationship with him, even before we got married, it was just fraught with fights and arguments all the time. Shouting, me being constantly blamed for everything. I was the one that was causing the problems as far as he was concerned. I was always making him unhappy. I was always doing something wrong to cause him to react to me in anger or shout at me. That was basically what was happening in our relationship. Eventually, I stopped working at the school that I'd initially gone to volunteer in, and I started helping out at his mother's school. So even though he was spending a lot of his time on at his university campus, I was living with his parents. And because we were Christians, his parents didn't think that it was a good idea that we were sort of living together. So they spoke to him about basically getting married and made arrangements with my mom and my aunt for us to get married. I wasn't really sure that he was the right person for me. And the reason why I know this because by God's grace, I journal a lot. And during that time, I had been journaling my experiences and everything. So a few months ago, I started reading through my journals, and I realized what a bad relationship it really was, because something my therapist and I've recently come across, that when you experience trauma, you tend to forget a lot of things because apparently that's your brain's way of protecting you. So I knew that the relationship was bad and I did not want to be with this man, but I didn't know why I had forgotten so much. But reading through my journal, so I have to say it's so important for you to journal. And reading through my journals, I realized what a torturous relationship it had been right from the beginning. I was questioning actually whether I should be married, whether this man was the right person for me. I was actually, I wouldn't say I was seeking God, because I didn't know how to seek God at the time. I did ask in prayer, is this the right person for me? And I was looking for signs. I remember one of the signs I was looking for, um, that he and I had cast lots with our prayer, and the lot fell on me. It was between me and another girl he knew, and the lot fell on me. So we took that as a sign. Another thing was he'd had a dream, and in the dream he was told that he shouldn't be afraid to marry me. That was a sign. Another thing was that he told me that I should draw this image, a picture of him wearing a special outfit that he would have worn on a special occasion, the color of it. And if I got it right, that was confirmation that we should be married. So I drew this picture, presented it to him with the right color, which I had kind of guessed, and he said that was a confirmation. I'd say two other things happened that sort of confirmed it for me. One of them, there was one time we were somewhere, and a prophet came, somebody he knew who was supposed to be a prophet, came and said that, that God was going to use this man to bring me glory, and so I should take care of him the way the Bible had described a wife taking care of her husband. We were not married at the time, but of course I took that as a confirmation. And then there was another time, we went to a bank. This was before we were married, and he went inside to the cashier, and I was standing outside waiting for him, and the security guard at the bank came up to me and said he'd had a dream that a couple would come to the bank, and God had sent him to tell the woman that she should not leave her husband, because if she left her husband, she will become sick, God will kill her. When I heard that, of course, my initial reaction was shock and fear. I didn't know that the Bible says that we should test the spirit. I didn't know enough about God's character to know that God will not say something which was inconsistent with his character, and that will make me feel afraid. So I took all those different things happening as confirmation that this was the right person for me to marry, even though internally I wasn't sure, and my journals had captured that. So we went ahead with the marriage. Um, Nothing changed, nothing improved. I remember I had some people warning me, like, I was attending a church just before I traveled, in between the period of when I left uni and I traveled. So about a year I was at this church, and when I met him, I wrote to the pastor's wife and I said to her I'd met this man, and she wrote back and basically warned me that I should be careful. She sort of said, you don't know him, take your time and just be careful. When I read that letter, I kind of got a bit angry with her, and I dismissed that. My best friend at the time, I'd also written to her and I told her I'd met this guy. She wrote back and said, are you seeking God's face about this? And I said, yeah. But I dismissed that. And then my mother and my aunt, you know, they they were back in the UK, and they were aware that I was seeing this man and I was having problems with him, arguments and things like that. I mean, when I went to the country, I had money. Basically, he depleted my resources. I mean, he wasn't working, he was a student, so I shared everything I had with him, even my mobile phone, which he eventually lost. Um, but all my money and my finances were drained. So my mother and my aunt were sending me money, which I was sharing with him. So at one point, they said that they were going to send me a ticket to come back to the UK. And I was reluctant because I was afraid of losing the relationship. So I didn't take up that offer at the time when they had money to send me the ticket. They said that I should come back to give him a chance to value me, to respect me, to miss me. But I was so afraid of losing the relationship. So I was really hesitant. When things got really bad between us, I'd actually wanted to travel back to the UK, but by the time my mother and my aunt didn't have the money anymore, so I was stuck in this country. I didn't have anywhere to stay. Like I said, I was staying in with his parents. So the wedding plans took place. He wasn't really um, interested in the wedding arrangements or anything. I kind of did that. Another thing before I go on to talk about the wedding plans, another so-called red flag that happened was earlier on in our relationship. I remember I became really sick. to the point that I couldn't even walk. I was dizzy and faint walking. And I remember this was really early, maybe like a couple of weeks after meeting. And he called me, and I said to him I was sick, that why hadn't he called me to check up on me? So maybe a few weeks after, we started seeing each other, and he got angry on the phone. He snapped at me, and he said, like, why was I bothering him? Like, why was I hassling him? And when he said that, I was shocked. I thought, oh, okay. I blamed myself. I thought, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. And instead of me seeing that as a red flag, as a warning that this was not the type of person I needed to be with, I rather kind of blamed myself and decided not to hassle him, and I continued with the relationship. Like I said, there were so many different things. It was a lot of controlling my behavior, controlling the things that I ate. I might have mentioned that already. The clothes that I wore, you know. I was alone in this country, even though that's originally where I had come from. But I hadn't been there for years, decades even. So I didn't really know anyone. So I didn't have, apart from the people I'd written to, there was nobody present with me in the country. So anyway, back to the wedding plan. So the wedding plans I kind of arranged. I was pretty much organizing everything. He wasn't particularly interested. I remember on the actual wedding day, we got married at a registrar's office in the city, and the capital city. And after the ceremony, he kind of got into a taxi, went back to his university campus to do politics. I came in another taxi with his sister back to the house to continue planning for the day, organizing the day. When he came back in the evening, we had an argument, and over something really trivial. I think it was over drinks or something, but he was unhappy with me, and he was basically having a go at me. So we went through the motions. A pastor came over to the house to bless the marriage, and I remember the occasion wasn't a happy one. It wasn't a joyous one. I just kind of went through the motions. So there we were married. We went on to have 4 children, 3 girls and a boy. My son went to be with the Lord when he was 2 years old. So I'm left with my 3 children, my 3 daughters. The oldest is 23, and then I have my middle one that's 20, and my little girl's 13. My 2 older children have no contact with him. I have no contact with him. My little girl occasionally speaks to him. That has been a very brief introduction about my experiences. In subsequent videos, I will talk more about the specific types of abuse that I experienced. I will talk about my path to healing, how God literally delivered me from this toxic relationship. And I would just talk a lot more about, the types of abuse I experienced, in the hopes that it will help people. And if you want to talk to me directly, more one-to-one, please email me. My email address is ghdv777@gmail.com, ghdv777@gmail.com. I'm here to be a listening ear, share my experiences in more detail, and also to provide resources to how I became free from this really bad place I was in, that God literally rescued me and my children from. Thank you so much for listening. Please like this video and share it. Subscribe to the channels to help it to grow, because I think that this is something that God really wants me to do, because I think the experiences I had were so insidious. Not, why I stayed in it for so long, in a relationship for 24 and a half years with an abusive man. I stayed in it for so long. So I like to be able to help other women, especially, to escape, literally escape. Thank you so much for listening, and God bless you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.